The gesture of kindness. Have you ever wondered how far you would go to do the right thing? What would you do if you saw someone who, like you, struggles every day to survive, but is left with nothing? Most people would probably move on, ignoring it, convinced that it's not their problem. But what if you had the opportunity to change someone's life, even if it meant putting your own life at risk? Luana never had to ask that question. For her, the answer was simple. Whenever possible, she would do the right thing even if the world told her otherwise. Luana worked as a waitress in the heart of a big city, where there was a lot of hustle and bustle and people, for the most part, were more concerned about their own problems than those of others. She, aged 25, lived in a small apartment in the suburbs and took care of her mother, who was facing a chronic illness. Even with a heavy life and an exhausting routine, Luana always found time to smile. It was almost a personal mission to make the customer feel that their dish was more than just food, it was an experience. But that day something different happened. While serving tables, Luana noticed something that made her stomach tighten. A homeless man was standing on the sidewalk in front of the restaurant. It wasn't uncommon to see people asking for help, but there was something about this man that caught his attention. He wasn't asking for money. I was just observing. His eyes were fixed on the people dining, following the movements of each bite, as if he could taste the dishes with just his eyes. His disheveled hair, unshaven beard, torn and dirty clothes did not go unnoticed, but it was his expression, empty and hungry, that touched Luana's heart. She knew she couldn't ignore that scene. It was as if, looking at him, she saw her own sick mother, waiting for a gesture of compassion. But what could you do? The restaurant where he worked wasn't exactly a place where kindness was appreciated. On the contrary, it was a rigid space where rules always came first. Luana approached the kitchen looking for the boss, Mr. Braga, a man with a stern face and a look that did not admit weakness. He was known for his strict stance, especially regarding what was and was not allowed inside the restaurant. "Excuse me, Mr. Braga, can I get a plate of leftovers for that man on the sidewalk? I pay out of my pocket." Braga looked at her, without even looking up from the counter where he was preparing the ingredients. "Here, Luana, nothing is left. This is not a hostel. We are here to serve customers, not to do charity." The answer was quick, direct and without room for debate. Luana felt discouraged, but something inside her couldn't remain silent. She knew that this man's hunger had nothing to do with rules or protocols. Back in the dining room, as he prepared to serve the next dishes, the image of the man on the sidewalk never left his mind. She felt helpless, as if she had two options: close her eyes and move on like everyone else, or act according to what her heart told her. Yet she could not live with the weight of having made the wrong choice, of having ignored a life in need. The decision was made quickly. She didn't need to ask permission to do good. With discretion, Luana prepared a simple dish: bread, scrambled eggs and a hot cup of coffee. Nothing fancy, but enough for someone who hadn't eaten in days. She picked up the plate with shaking hands, looked around to make sure no one saw her, and walked out the side door. As she approached the man, he looked at her suspiciously, as if he didn't believe anyone could care about him. Luana didn't hesitate. He just said in a soft voice, almost like a whisper, "Here, sir. For you." The man watched her for a moment, completely surprised. With shaking hands he took the plate, mouthing words of gratitude. I don't know how to thank you. May God bless you." Luana smiled at him, a smile that came from a deep place, as if she was giving back to the world some of the compassion she believed everyone deserved. Her heart felt light, as if she had just accomplished something really important. After everything, she returned to work, feeling at peace with herself. She didn't know what the future held for her, but at that moment she felt like she had done the right thing. But what Luana didn't know was that that simple gesture of kindness, done with an open heart and without expecting anything in return, would change her life in ways she could never imagine. And, most importantly, it would change the lives of others around her in ways she never thought possible. As she returned to her post, believing she had done the right thing, the sound of firm footsteps echoed behind her. When he turned around, he found Mr. Braga coming towards him. His face was red with anger, his steps heavy, as if he already knew what had happened. He was not alone. Curious looks from customers and employees followed him. "Luana, what do you think you're doing?" The tension in the air was palpable. Luana took a deep breath, trying to remain calm in the face of a situation that she knew could be her undoing. "Sir, I was just helping. That man was hungry." Braga looked at her disapprovingly. "Hunger? That's not our problem. You disrespected the rules and by doing so, damaged the restaurant's image. This type of attitude is not acceptable here." Luana felt her face burn, a heat that rose from her neck to the tips of her ears. She tried to explain herself, but the words barely left her mouth. What was she doing there? All he wanted was to help someone in need. But that didn't seem to matter to Braga, nor to the customers who watched the scene in silence. I would pay for the food, sir. I just wanted to help someone in need. Braga slammed his hand hard on the table, making everyone around him move away. He approached her, his eyes cold and merciless. He arrives. You're fired. Get your things and leave now. The impact of the word fired made Luana freeze. His world seemed to have collapsed in seconds. She knew bills were piling up at home. She also knew that her mother depended on her. But at that moment she couldn't regret what she did. She knew that in some way life was testing her true mettle. With tears in her eyes, Luana took off her apron and with a firm voice replied, "All good. But I would do it again if I had to." She looked around, looks of pity and surprise following her. And without looking back, he left the restaurant with a heavy heart, but with a feeling that something bigger was about to happen. The first thematic element, solidarity in the midst of adversity. Imagine the scene. Luana, with her life full of challenges, makes a simple but powerful choice. She decides to not just observe someone else's pain but to act. Luana's story, although fictional, is a reflection of something very real and often neglected: the solidarity in the midst of adversity. But what does it really mean to be supportive when personal circumstances are already difficult? Are we willing to put others before ourselves when the need is great? Let's reflect for a moment. According to a study published in 2020 by the World Health Organization (WHO), more than 700 million people in the world live below the extreme poverty line. There are millions of Luanas around the world, individuals who, despite personal difficulties, take actions that can change lives. What the WHO points out as an important characteristic is that, even in a scenario of scarcity, attitudes of solidarity tend to create a support network, a kind of domino effect, where a kind gesture can inspire others to take action too. And that's exactly what starts to happen in Luana's life. After his dismissal from the restaurant, something strange and unexpected happened. Although she was sent away in a cruel and merciless way, the consequences of this act were not as simple as being fired from her job. When Luana was forced to leave the restaurant, she was still trying to process the humiliation she had faced, but what she didn't know was that her seemingly small act of kindness had touched the heart of someone who was about to change her life. And that someone wasn't just anyone, he was a businessman, a successful entrepreneur, who saw something in her that others simply hadn't noticed: her character. Renato Albuquerque, a businessman known in the city for his chain of restaurants, was having lunch with some friends in front of the restaurant when he witnessed the scene of Luana helping the homeless man. For him, that gesture was something rare, an example of genuine kindness that did not go unnoticed. Renato observed the world in a more critical way than many, but at that moment, something inside him said he should do something. The historical context that can be associated with this type of attitude is the idea of solidarity as resistance, something that is observed in several moments of social crisis. For example, during the Great Depression of the 1930s in the United States, the world economy collapsed and millions of people were affected. However, one of the most striking movements of that time was the increase in community actions. Even in poverty, many people, like Luana, took it upon themselves to help others. The idea was simple: if we can't give more, at least we can share what little we have. Solidarity is often seen as a survival mechanism social. In times of extreme hardship, like those the world experienced during the 1929 crisis or more recently with the COVID-19 pandemic, people came together in ways that challenged established norms. These historical moments showed that mutual help, the ability to look at others and share what you have, is more important than social rules that prioritize individualism. Returning to Luana's story, the repercussion of her gesture was something she never imagined. When Renato Albuquerque found her on the park bench, completely lost and in the midst of a whirlwind of thoughts about the future, he made a proposal that would transform her life forever. "I saw what happened, and what you did was admirable. Few people have that courage. The world needs more people like you." Renato wasn't just offering a job. He was offering a chance. More than that, he was recognizing Luana's value in a way that had never happened before. Luana's life up to that point was marked by obstacles, like many who face financial, family and professional difficulties. However, her kindness, which to others might seem like an insignificant act, caused her to be seen by someone who had the power to change her trajectory. This change of perspective is not uncommon in overcoming stories. Often, a simple gesture of solidarity opens doors that we never imagined were there. Luana's story becomes a clear example of how an act of kindness can positively impact someone's life, creating a network effect that goes beyond the first interaction. It is also important to mention that this type of transformation does not only happen to the individuals who benefit. It also transforms the surrounding society. When Renato offered Luana the job, he wasn't just helping a woman in financial difficulties. He was reinforcing the idea that successful companies and people have a responsibility to give back to the community. This type of mindset is what can create real change in a more fair and balanced society. Academic studies, such as that of sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, suggest that when people receive support and are valued for their actions, it strengthens the capital social. This concept concerns the idea that human relationships and mutual support between members of a society are important resources for achieving collective goals. In Luana's case, her kindness not only transformed her own life, but also provided her with the opportunity to help others, creating a network of people willing to offer what they had. In Luana's world, solidarity is also a resistance instrument. She did not bow down to the injustice of being fired, but instead stood firm in what she believed in. His decision to help this man without expecting anything in return was undoubtedly a reflection of his own life experiences. The adversity she faced at home with her mother sick and bills to pay made her a more empathetic person, more connected to other people's pain. Luana's choice is something that could easily be ignored by others, but it is precisely this type of behavior that can generate the type of change that society so desperately needs. Luana, by helping the man on the street, did more than a simple act of kindness. She challenged social norms that dictate that we should be indifferent to the problems of others. She did the right thing even though it could cost him his job and his financial stability. The effect of solidarity that Luana created spread far beyond the square and the walls of the restaurant. His attitude of giving something of himself to someone in need provoked a reflection on how small actions, often unrecognized, can be more powerful than grandiose actions done just to show virtue. This is a lesson that not only Luana learned, but that we can all take into our lives. Kindness, when planted, blooms. And when we least expect it, it can change our lives forever. The second thematic element, the importance of valuing moral choices in the face of adversity. In moments of crisis or adversity, we are often faced with choices that can profoundly alter the course of our lives and, consequently, the lives of others. Luana's story challenges us to reflect on how we react when faced with moral dilemmas. What defines our choices when we are pressured by difficulties? How should we act when we have to choose between following what is easiest or following what is right? The answer to these questions lies at the heart of what we call morality in times of crisis, and this is what defines the true nature of people who face adversity. Luana's moral choice, when deciding to help the homeless man, is not just a reflection of her natural kindness. It is, in fact, a choice that questions the social and professional norms that often dictate what is acceptable and what is not. By deciding to act according to her own principles, Luana demonstrates ethical behavior that goes beyond simply following the rules. His attitude defies convention and puts what is really important at the forefront, the well-being of others. The first question that arises, then, is, what does it mean to do the right thing when no one is watching? Morality and ethical challenges. In moral psychology, there are different theories that explain how people make choices in complex ethical situations. One of the most relevant to Luana's situation is the theory of utilitarianism, which states that the morally correct action is the one that generates the greatest good for the greatest number of people. According to this theory, even if helping the homeless man meant disobeying the restaurant's rules, the human benefit of alleviating a person's hunger and suffering would outweigh the consequences of violating the rules. This line of thought finds support in philosophers such as Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, who argue that, in many situations, collective happiness should be prioritized. However, in a more realistic scenario, we can think that Luana's choices could be seen differently. Many would think her behavior was irresponsible, even naive. After all, not only did she disobey the restaurant's rules, but she also acted without considering the possible financial and professional repercussions for herself. This reflects what we call deontological morality, a theory defended by the philosopher Immanuel Kant, which suggests that actions should be evaluated based on the principle that we must do our duty regardless of the consequences. According to Kant, the duty to help others, especially those most in need, does not depend on approval or circumstances, but on what is right to do. In this sense, Luana, by acting on impulse and helping the man, was not only following a moral principle, but also acting with empathy. She didn't do this expecting anything in return. She took action because she put herself in the shoes of someone who was going hungry, and that pushed her to do what she thought was the right thing. This empathy is, without a doubt, one of the noblest aspects of human morality. According to studies in social neuroscience, empathy is a fundamental skill for social cohesion, as it allows us to recognize the suffering of others and act to mitigate it. Luana wasn't just making an isolated moral choice. She was, in a way, validating a worldview that privileges the collective well-being, and not just the individual. This vision is essential when we think about how society should act in times of crisis. In a time of great difficulty like the one Luana was facing, often the act of choosing solidarity over selfishness can mean the difference between transforming someone's life and simply ignoring it. Luana's gesture is a clear expression of how human morality must often be beyond the rules and social conventions that surround us. The influence of moral choices on the future. Luana's story and recognition. The importance of moral choices is also reflected in the consequences they generate. In Luana's story, what might have seemed like a simple help to a homeless man turned into a crucial turning point in her life. After being fired, Luana was lost and didn't know what to do. However, the recognition his moral actions by Renato Albuquerque not only brought him a new job, but also gave him an opportunity to rebuild his life. This type of moral recognition has a significant impact on human behavior. Studies show that when our actions are seen and valued by others, it reinforces our sense of identity and self-esteem. In other words, Renato's recognition of Luana was not only a material gift, but also a validation of her dignity and character. For her, it was a confirmation that her choices were aligned with values that are, in fact, appreciated by society. This type of positive feedback can be transformative, as it is a reminder that good moral choices they do not go unnoticed and, over time, bring rewards, whether in emotional, social, or professional terms. The valuation of morality in companies and society. When Renato offers Luana a new job, he is also doing something very important. He is not just offering a position, but he is demonstrating that, in a world where pragmatism and the pursuit of profit often prevail, there is still room for the appreciation of human values. He recognized in Luana something that few see in his employees, a commitment to ethical principles that go beyond simple compliance with the rules. This point is relevant, as it reveals how companies and business leaders can benefit from valuing ethical behaviors and moral choices in their teams. In a study carried out by Harvard Business School in 2019, it was concluded that companies that promote ethics and respect in everyday decisions not only have a positive impact on the community, but also experience greater loyalty and commitment by its employees. By recognizing that Luana had an upright and ethical character, Renato not only changed his life, but also positioned himself as someone who values character and morality within your corporate environment. Ultimately, moral choices have a multiplier effect. Like a seed that, once planted, spreads and bears fruit, kindness and respect for others are behaviors that have the power to transform lives in profound ways. Luana not only followed her principles, but in doing so, she also taught others about the importance of acting with integrity. And, as we've seen, his story didn't end with a simple decision to help the man on the street. She became an example to all of us of how small actions can have big repercussions. As Luana's story progresses, we see a crucial aspect of being human reveal itself: the ability to forgiveness and the search for redemption. When she helps the homeless man, her action not only reflects kindness, but also the choice of don't judge. This simple gesture defies expectations and brings to light a much deeper principle: the idea that, by doing good, we can provide others with the opportunity to start over, to redeem. This notion of redemption is central to the story. The homeless man, when helped by Luana, finds not just a meal, but a chance to change his destiny. The forgiveness implicit in this gesture offers you the opportunity to overcome your suffering, begin a new journey and build something better for yourself. Luana didn't ask for anything in return, nor did she expect immediate recognition. She just did what she felt was right, trusting that a simple act of kindness could open doors to a new chance. However, the true moral of this part lies in the moment when the man himself, now rehabilitated, returns to Luana's life to express his gratitude. He who was once lost and without hope, now finds himself on a new path, rebuilding his life. In doing so, he symbolizes the power of second chance and the importance of forgiving yourself for past failures. It is a reminder that everyone has the ability to transform, no matter how deep the abyss into which we fall. The power of good and transformation. Luana's story teaches us that often the choices we make, although small in the moment, can have a profound impact, not only on our lives but also on the lives of others. She reminds us that true transformation begins when we decide to act with compassion, without expecting rewards or recognition. Luana's gesture of offering a plate of food to a man in need triggered a chain of events that brought renewal and hope not only for him, but also for herself. Along this journey, We have seen the power of choices, morals, yes, solidarity, and from empathy. But perhaps most importantly, we saw the power of redemption. That man was not just fed physically. He was fueled by the belief that there was still a path to change his life. And Luana, by doing what was right, discovered that, by doing good, we not only help others but we also help ourselves. Every act of kindness without expecting something in return is a seed that, over time, blossoms in unexpected ways. The final message is clear. Never underestimate the power of your actions. The good you do, even without witnesses, always has the potential to transform lives. Sometimes what seems like a simple moral choice is, in fact, the beginning of something bigger, something that can touch hearts, change destinies, and bring light to a world that often seems marked by darkness. Now think, what would you do if you were in Luana's shoes? Would you make the decision to help, even knowing the consequences? Does good always return, or is kindness an act with no expectation of reward? The answer, perhaps, lies in the small choices we make every day.